Well, today, the 9 justices of the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments in 2 major cases, one from West Virginia and the other from Idaho. They could have major implications for the future of women's sports nationwide. Now, at the heart of the debate is a basic belief, grounded in both faith and science, that God created men and women as biologically distinct. Now, supporters of these laws saying protecting women's sports honors that design and preserves fairness, safety, and equal opportunity for female athletes. The court is now being asked to decide whether states can uphold these protections in their state laws. Joining me now is Washington Stand reporter Casey Harper, who has been tracking this story and is outside the Supreme Court. Casey, give us an overview of how today's case, the oral arguments went.
Yeah, that's right, Tony. I'm here outside the Supreme Court, where earlier today, protesters on both sides gathered to make their voice heard on a case that really could set major precedent for the transgender issue, transgender athletes in school sports around the country. So the supporters in the case today, they argue that this law makes inherent physical advantages that boys have over girls lead to unfairness for young girls. Here's what the West Virginia attorney had to say.
West Virginia schools can no longer designate teams by looking to biological sex. Instead, schools must place students on sports teams based on their self-identified gender. But that idea turns Title IX, a law Congress passed to protect educational opportunities for girls, into a law that actually denies those opportunities for girls.
So, Tony, this case is really the culmination of a long-standing, ongoing transgender athlete debate. The defenders of the transgender athletes say that this is just about basic fairness for the girls, but the defenders of the West Virginia and Idaho laws say, hey, this is actually about fairness for the girls who we know have been injured by transgender male athletes, who've been had their records taken, and who have often lost places and opportunities to compete. This case, we should expect a ruling in the summer, Tony.
A little bit later with Jonathan Scruggs of Alliance Defending Freedom, who was arguing the case today. Alliance Defending Freedom was. All right, Casey, let's switch gears. Let's talk about the situation in Minnesota. What's the latest out of Minneapolis?
That's right, Tony. So outside, Minneapolis is seeing protests continue in the city, as we're also seeing around the country. But the Keith Ellison in Minneapolis is actually suing the Department of Homeland Security over this. Here's what he had to say.
We asked the courts to end the DHS unlawful behavior in our state, the intimidation, the threats, the violence. We asked the courts to end the tactics on our places of worship, our schools, our courts, our marketplaces.
And so, Tony, these protests are coming after, of course, the fatal shooting of a woman in Minneapolis at the hands of an ICE officer amid ongoing deportation efforts, not just in Minneapolis, but around the country. And it all started, as you know, with that investigation into massive $9 billion, at least that we know of, worth of fraud in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, which is under investigation now by the federal government. A lot of issues overlapping, culminating in ongoing protests, and I don't think that it's going away anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, again, we've talked about this before, and I guess we'll continue to track it, but it's just it's a symptom of the lawlessness that we've seen in many of these blue states for a number of years. Well, let's switch gears to the situation in Iran. President Trump is urging Iranians to keep protesting, saying help is on the way as Iran's government intensifies its deadly crackdown. What's the latest information we have out of Iran?
Yeah, so President Trump called on Iranian protesters to continue their demonstrations. He even spoke of, the U.S. coming to help. But what do we know, to your question, about going on inside the country? Unfortunately, we have at least, the death toll right now is at least about 2,000 protesters have been killed by the Iranian government. We also have reports of mass arrests within the country, and that's likely what helped prompt President Trump to make these threats. He's also announced new tariffs on countries doing business with Iran, and he's not ruled out that further military action. At least for now, despite the U.S. pressure and the ongoing protests, the Iranian government is holding, but the situation is changing day by day, Tony.
All right. Thank you, Casey. Appreciate the update there from the U.S. Supreme Court.